flora as well.
Sounds good. And go ahead and take this moment to mute yourself too if you're not already, just so we can make sure there aren't any distractions during the presentation. Okay, let's dive in. Devaney, slide. Thank you. Okay, so Devaney did a quick little introduction for me. I'll just add a few more details. I am a registered dietitian. I'm also a certified personal trainer, so I've got a little bit of training knowledge in my back pocket. I'm a distance runner. I was signed up for the 2020 New York City Marathon, but unfortunately that's canceled along with pretty much every other race. So shout out to all you guys training for virtual marathons this fall. And another exciting thing that happened to me this summer was getting a puppy. If you look in this bottom left corner there, you can see my little girl, Daisy. She's about 13 weeks old now. She's a golden doodle. I love her with my whole heart. And when it comes to nutrition, my philosophy is that, as Devaney mentioned, you know, it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. It's very individualized. I like to take it case by case. I also think that nutrition should be sustainable. Whatever kind of diet you're following, you should be able to do it ideally for the rest of your life, right? It should be easy, maintainable, or, you know, even if it's short term, it shouldn't be, you know, it shouldn't ruin your quality of life. And that's why I truly believe nutrition should be able to improve your performance without sacrificing your quality of life. You should be able to enjoy the food you're eating. You should be able to enjoy eating socially, out with friends, etc. Go ahead and go to the next slide. Okay, so today we're going to talk about why nutrition matters. We're going to cover some nutrition basics, nutrition 101. We're going to talk about how you can fuel before, during, and after performance, or, you know, going for a run, going for a race. We'll talk about hydration and electrolyte needs, and then if we have time at the end, we'll go over some questions. Next slide. All right, so this is a rhetorical question. Just think to yourself really quick, what comes to mind when you think about nutrition and running? So just go ahead and think for a quick second. Devaney, go to the next slide. So I love this quote right here. This is, I think, the best way to think about nutrition when it comes to running. Good nutrition may not make an average runner a great runner, but poor nutrition can make a great runner average. And I love this because it really, you know, it talks about how there's so many things that go into our performance as a runner: training, rest, recovery, all those things. But it shows that nutrition can be that one thing that we're missing that can just really make or break our performance. And so I'm sure you guys are all aware that nutrition has some kind of importance here. So that's what we're here to talk about today: the power of nutrition and how we can use it to improve our performance. So when you think about nutrition and running, you can think about the food that you eat as like fuel that's going into a car. It's not only going to get you to where you want to go, get you from point A to point B, but it's also going to influence how well you're running as a car, and then also literally as you're running. So nutrition is great. It can increase our energy and endurance. It can influence, you know, how much muscle mass you're putting on, how strong you're going to be. It can help us increase strength, power, exercise capacity, so you can get more out of your workouts and need less recovery time in between your workouts. It can also improve things like our tissue quality, so that's going to influence, you know, our muscle quality, our joint quality. It's going to help us prevent injuries. What you eat can impact how well you sleep, which we all know is super important for our training. And then it's also good for our cognitive function. So think about things like decision-making, mental clarity, which we all know can be very important, especially when it comes to race day. I can go to the next slide. So let's talk about the basics of nutrition. So when I mean the basics of nutrition, what I'm talking about is building a firm foundation. If you guys have ever built a house, or even if you haven't, you probably know that the first thing you want to do is start with a firm foundation before you move on to some of the accessory things like painting the walls, right? You're not going to be able to paint any walls if there ain't no walls there. So with this presentation, what we're going to start with is the nutrition foundations. These are things that you should really focus on before you start to worry about accessory things, you know, like supplements or even pre, during, post performance basics. So here's a visual of what I was talking about earlier. We're going to start with our foundations, energy needs, key nutrients, hydration. These are things that you want to get down first. They're going to be more important. And those are going to give you a firm foundation for moving into some of those accessory items. Next slide. All right, so let's start with some of the key nutrients. The most popular among runners is going to be carbohydrates. These are great. They're the preferred source of fuel for the body and the brain. They're going to promote digestive and heart health with the fiber that they often contain. They're also going to help sure that we don't break down our muscle while we're exercising, or get hypoglycemia or low blood sugar while we're exercising. And when it comes to recommended sources, one thing I like to emphasize is that carbohydrates are found in a lot of different foods. It's not just found in, things that we think of like pasta and bagels and donuts and candy. It's also found in fruits and vegetables. It's found in legumes. It can even be found in some dairy products. But when you're thinking about what kind of carbohydrates you want to focus on getting more, my tip is to focus on getting more whole unprocessed forms. So think about things like oats, brown rice, quinoa, whole grain products like whole wheat tortillas, bagels, that sort of thing. And then also potatoes, if you want to get more fiber out of your potatoes, keep the skin on, as well as fruit. So if you're a numbers person and you want to get a better idea of how many carbohydrates you should be aiming for per day, we've got a list here that you can see depending on how active you are and how much you're training. Most people are going to need somewhere in between 5 to 12 grams of carbohydrate per kilogram of body weight. And you can see here how that number increases as training increases. If you're not a numbers person and this list like freaks you out and you're trying to do all the math in your head and it's causing you to stress out, don't worry. I'm going to give you a simpler way to understand this later on. But for your numbers people, here you go. For you other guys, hang tight. We'll get there in a second. Next slide. Okay, so the next key nutrient we're going to talk about is protein. My favorite way to think about protein is as the little Lego pieces of the body. They're like our little building blocks. They come together, we stack them on top of each other to build things. So think about building muscle, and then also for repairing things. What happens if, your 2-year-old kid knocks over their Lego set? You're going to use the Legos to build them up, just like if you were injured, you would use protein to help rebuild structures in the body. And protein can also be a good source of energy. So when it comes to recommended sources, of course, you can consume things like lean meats, poultry, seafood, eggs, some type of dairy, right, have good amount of protein. And then also, plant-based proteins can also be a good source of protein. Think about things like lentils, beans, tofu, nuts, and seeds. Sometimes they don't have as much protein as the equivalent serving of an animal-based protein, but that doesn't mean that you can't meet your protein needs as a vegetarian or vegan athlete. And if you are following one of these diets, if you have concerns about meeting your protein needs, don't hesitate to email me or even talk about nutrition counseling. That's definitely something we could talk about. You can meet your protein needs. It just might take a little bit of effort. So when it comes to recommended daily amounts, most people can get their needs with 1.2 to 1.6 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. But there are some instances where your protein needs could actually increase to the point where you're eating just as much or even more than like the bodybuilder friend that you know. So it has been suggested that 1.8 and up grams of protein per kilogram might be beneficial for, elite endurance athletes, people who are training for competitive marathons, and then also those who are restricting their energy intake. This will help make sure that you aren't losing your muscle mass that you've worked so hard to build up. And then also, this is an area that can definitely be studied more, but there have been 2 recent studies that have shown that endurance athletes who aren't necessarily elite, they're just kind of people who are training for about an hour a day, 5 to 6 days a week, can benefit from even higher amounts of protein. So now we're looking at about 1.65 to up to 2.6 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight, which is a decent amount. And, I don't say this to freak you out or to make you think that you need to start chugging protein shakes, right? But what I want you to get out of this message is, hey, protein is important, even if you're an endurance athlete. It's not all about pasta, right? We got to get our protein, and we definitely want to make sure we're getting some at every single meal and snack. I'll go into more detail about this in just a second. Next slide. Our next key nutrient is fat. It's definitely not something you want to be afraid of. Fat is very important, even for endurance athletes. We just want to make sure we're choosing the right amount and the right type of quality of fat. So fat's important. It helps us absorb vitamins and minerals. It's a source of energy, a really concentrated, great source of energy. It helps us with our body temperature regulation. Ladies especially, it's great for our hormone production, and it has a lot more things in the body. So when it comes to recommended sources, what I like to tell people is try to include more plant-based sources of fat in the diet. So think about, what you're going to put on your piece of toast. If you have the option between butter and avocado, hey, maybe go for the avocado. And avocado is delicious. Who doesn't love that, right? So the other tip I have is trying to include more sources of omega-3s in the diet, specifically omega-3s that are going to be coming from fatty fish. So think about things like salmon, mackerel, sardines. Omega-3s can also be found in plant-based sources like nuts and seeds and some other types of foods. But this is a special kind of omega-3. It's called ALA. It's not associated as much with the omega-3s coming from fatty fish, which are known as EPA and DHA. That doesn't mean it's bad or anything, but we really do want to make sure that we are getting fatty fish in our diet. The American Heart Association does recommend about 2 servings of fatty fish per week. And if that's something that is not working for you, or you don't like fish, or you're vegan, vegetarian, you might be up for a omega-3 or a fish oil type supplement, or if you're vegan, an algae-based supplement. And again, that's something you can come talk to me about. And then when it comes to recommended amounts, most people are going to benefit from 20 to 35% of total daily calories in the diet. Next slide. Okay, so guys, I'm not a dietitian. I wouldn't be, what kind of dietitian would I be if I didn't talk about fruits and vegetables, right? So although they are not like a macronutrient, like the carbohydrates, protein, and fat that we were talking about, they would most likely fall under the carbohydrate category. I do want to emphasize them as a key nutrient here, just because it's something that you want to make sure you're including on your plate. So I think we all know fruits and vegetables are really great for anybody, especially runners. They're good source of vitamins, minerals. They help us recover from injuries. They're going to strengthen our immune system so we don't get sick. They're awesome. When it comes to recommended sources, I'm not going to tell you only eat kale or only eat, this type of vegetable. They're all great, honestly. As long as you're eating fruits and vegetables, I'm happy. What I will say though is don't eat the same kinds of fruits and vegetables day in, day out. Try to get variety, because the different colors that you're seeing from fruits and vegetables contain different types of nutrients. So eat the rainbow, try to mix it up, try new fruits and vegetables that you've never tried before. Eat seasonally. Variety is definitely good when it comes to fruits and veggies. And when it comes to recommended amounts, 5 to 10 servings a day is a good place to start. And then try to get at least half of your fruits and vegetables from vegetables. Next slide. Okay, so let's talk about meeting our energy needs. As runners, we burn a lot of energy, right? So how can we make sure that we're meeting our needs? Well, like I said, nutrition is not a one-size-fits-all approach. There are so many different factors that are going to determine how much energy we should be taking in, or how much calories we should be taking in. It's influenced by our age, our body composition, how much fat, how much muscle we have, how active we are, what goals we have from a fitness perspective, if we have any medical conditions, etc. I also really want to emphasize that underfueling can be a big issue for runners. If we're not taking in enough energy, that is really going to impact not only our performance, but also our health. It can influence our metabolic rate. It can influence our bone health. So, if you're prone to stress fractures, this is something that you definitely want to focus on. It can affect our immunity, which is especially important during this time. Females, if you are not getting your menstrual cycle, it's a very likely sign that you are underfueling. Even our mental health, right? Like we all know how terrible we feel when we're hungry and when we're low on energy. So yeah, underfueling is a big issue for runners. We want to make sure that we are meeting our energy needs. I also want to point out that really rigorous training, let's say you're in like a really intense part of your training cycle, Just because you're not feeling hungry or maybe your appetite isn't that large doesn't necessarily mean that, you're getting enough energy in, or that you can rely on your appetite as a good cue for how much energy you should be taking in. So this is where working with a dietitian can help. So you can come up with a fueling plan and make sure that you are getting enough during the day. For those of you who are interested in weight management, like you're using running to help lose a little bit of weight, what I would say is try to develop a realistic goal. Like, don't go into your marathon training cycle or your half marathon training cycle expecting to lose a significant amount of weight. Try to keep it really realistic. Also keep it performance oriented. Think about, I'm fueling my body so that I can meet this goal with my running. And that's going to help make it a more positive goal, right? You're not trying to focus on, I have to follow X, Y, and Z, and I didn't meet my weight goal. Just trust me, it's going to make it more positive. And then also keep your health as a top priority. If you are feeling, like you're experiencing some of those underfueling symptoms I mentioned earlier, that's a sign that you might be overdoing it, right? Again, this is a great chance to work with a dietitian. And then also, if you're trying to lose weight while training for a really intense race, or like let's say you're training for a marathon or an ultra marathon, maybe weight loss is something you want to pursue after that training season, just because you are going to be burning so many calories already, and there's a chance you could be under fueling. Go ahead and go to the next slide. So here are some signs to watch out for when it comes to under fueling, chronic fatigue. You're getting sick all the time. You might be noticing that you're losing strength, or that you have the inability to put on any muscle or gain any strength. Females, again, those absent or irregular menstrual cycles are not a good sign. You're always hurt, you're always injured. You're training so hard, but you're not seeing any improvements. If you are experiencing any of these things, or if you know someone who is, definitely tell them to, talk to a doctor, come see a registered dietitian, and that's definitely something that we can help you out with. Next slide. Okay, so for those of you who were like really struggling with those numbers I was putting up early, here's a good visual aid to kind of give you an idea of how you can meet your energy needs without having to do any math. So this is the athlete's plate, and I love it. It was created by the Committee of Olympic Sports Dietitians. So this is what they're using with their athletes. There's 3 different levels. I'm on the easy training right now, and we will progressively go up in training so you can see what those look like too. But this plate is good for most people, like most active people who are doing one workout a day that's not too intense. Maybe they're, a little bit more sedentary, and also for those who want to lose weight. So you can see that we've got half of our plate with those wonderful fruits and vegetables. We've got a quarter of our plate, or even a smaller amount, filled with those carbohydrates. And then we're also making sure that we're getting those protein sources. And then there's also showing that fat can be a part of that meal as well. So yeah, like I said, it's good for people who are doing, not less intense workouts, sports athletes that are, doing sports that require less energy. So I don't want to offend anyone, but maybe like a leisurely round of golf, something like that. And then those looking for weight management. Next slide. So this is the moderate training plate. This is actually a good place for, I would say, for those of you in this group who are running, this could be a good place for you to start and see what works better for you. You could go up or down with the 3 levels that I'm mentioning. So you can see basically that vegetables is going to decrease just a little bit, and then the starches are going to increase, right? You're exercising more, you're going to need a little bit more energy. Protein stays the same, and then fat increases as well. So this type of plate, you're getting a little bit more energy. That's going to be for more intense workouts, or if you're training 2 times a day with light to moderate training workouts. So let's say you do like a technical workout in the morning, and then in the evening you're going for a run. And as I mentioned earlier, it's a baseline for you guys to adjust to find what works well for you, or it's something that we can work on together as well. Next slide. So this is the hard training plate. This is when you are doing 2 really tough workouts a day, or if you have like a really big race coming up, this is kind of how you can eat the day of competition, or even several days leading up to your competition. So basically what's happening is we have a lot of starches on our plate. They're making up about half of the plate. We're getting lots of energy. We're getting lots of energy from our fat. We're getting protein, and then vegetables is a little bit smaller because they're great, full of lots of vitamins and minerals, but they're not as rich in energy. Okay, next slide. So again, this is a rhetorical question. I wish I could be with you guys and see all of your hands. But raise your hand or think to yourself, do I think I'm getting enough water every single day? So think about that question for a second. And maybe you're also thinking, well, I don't know, like, I don't even know how much water I should be drinking a day. I feel like I hear so much on the internet and in my running circles. Well, next slide, Devaney. That's what I'm here for. We're going to talk about how much water you should be drinking per day. So the last key nutrient we'll talk about is fluids or water, right? We all know water is super important. It's the major component of the body. It's going to help with recovery, reduce muscle cramps. It's really important for mental clarity, helps with body temperature regulation. It's summertime, we're hot. We really want to make sure that we're drinking water, right? So when it comes to recommended sources, water is our best choice. It doesn't have any added sugar, it's calorie-free, it's hydrating, so it's a good choice. You know, just during the day when you're trying to think about what you want to be sipping on. Flavored water is okay too. Maybe you like adding cucumbers, strawberries, lemon in your water, that's great. You can also use milk or like a plant-based milk as a source of hydration. That's totally fine. When you're thinking about things like tea or coffee, caffeine can be a little dehydrating depending on how much you drink and you're used to. But yeah, as I mentioned, depending on how much you drink, it can be a source of hydration. If you have any confusion, come talk to me. Coconut water. And then my tip is to limit sugar-sweetened beverages. Like trying to drink less soda, less soft drinks, less sugary caffeinated beverages from Starbucks. I do have an asterisk here though, because this is, just during the day. When we get to fueling for performance, when you're on the run, should I be drinking sports drinks? We'll get to that. But, just during the day, trying to drink water and trying to limit sugar in your beverages as much as possible. Okay, so how much water should you be drinking? It's going to depend on you and your training schedule. The main goal that you should focus on is trying to keep your urine a pale straw color. So you can see the image here is what you should be aiming for. If you're getting into that, dark amber color, that's not a good sign. You need to be drinking more water throughout the day. So if you want to think about numbers, an easy place to start is to aim for at least half of your body weight in ounces of water every single day. So if you're at 160-pound individual, you want to cut that in half, you get 80, translate that to ounces, boom. You want to be trying to drink at least 80 ounces of water, but if you're an athlete, if you're running, you're probably going to need more. Next slide. Okay, so we just covered the foundation. That was the base of our pyramid. Once you get those down, then we can start to really focus on these performance components. So here's what we want to be thinking about eating right before we're going to go out for a run. We're going to go race. Here's what we should be filling up with. The goal is, you want to fuel up, you want to give your body energy, but you also want to avoid digestive discomfort. I'm sure we've all gone out for a run before after eating something weird and it just hasn't been great, right? So here's what you can do to make sure that doesn't happen. So 3 to 4 hours before, you're going to be eating a typical meal. It's going to have carbs, protein, a little bit of fat. Some good examples are going to be chicken, rice, steamed vegetables. If it's in the morning, you can do an oatmeal bowl with some nut butter and a banana. Rich in carbohydrates, moderate in protein, right? When it gets to about 1 hour before, like let's say you're hungry again, you have a run coming up, that's when you want to enjoy a snack that is rich in easily digestible carbohydrates. So emphasis on easily digestible, that's going to help avoid that digestive discomfort. So you're looking at things like rice cakes, crackers, applesauce, fruit, a cereal bar, things that are more bland, right? You want to avoid some of those fatty fried foods, spicy foods, like even minty foods, anything that's irritating to your gut, and then also foods that are really high in fiber, because those aren't going to sit well in your stomach, especially while you're going out for a run. And, everybody's different. Maybe you can have like a really spicy burrito 5 minutes before you go out for your run and you're feeling fine. More power to you. But, if your gut is a little bit more sensitive, you might have to experiment with different types of pre-run snacks just to find what works best for you. Next slide. Okay, so you're out for your run, you're doing your race, you're exercising, right? What should you be fueling your body with during your performance? Well, the goal is to, keep your energy. You're burning through your energy as you're running, so you want to make sure that your energy level is staying level, and you also want to stay hydrated. And then similar to before, you don't want to get any digestive discomfort, so you want to keep avoiding foods that are going to cause you any GI pain. So if you're going for a run that's less than an hour, plain water is going to be fine. You don't really need to supplement with sports drinks or any exogenous source of carbohydrates. There might be some room for electrolytes. We'll get to that in just a second, but water is fine for most individuals. If you're exercising for over an hour, that's when you want to start adding in sources of energy to your body. So you want to give your body energy while you're on the run. So generally about 30 to 60 grams of carbohydrates per hour is what you want to aim for. Also some electrolytes. So you can see I have some examples here. A GOO packet, a 12-ounce serving of a sports drink. Those are usually going to have anywhere from 20 to 30 grams of carbohydrates. So that puts it into perspective for you. And then also about an ounce of dried fruit. If you look on the back of the nutrition label, you should be able to see how many grams of carbohydrates it has per serving, and you can go from there. If you're exercising for over 2.5 hours, so maybe you're doing like a half marathon, a marathon, your carbohydrate needs might increase. Some sources suggest that you should go up to 80 to 90 grams per hour. But the thing to keep in mind is the carbohydrates don't always sit well in some individual stomachs. If you have a more sensitive gut, you might need to try different types, or just keep that in the back of your mind. If you're going over 4 hours of running, then you can do some small amounts of protein and fat that can act as a source of energy, and then also help keep things palatable, because it's not always enjoyable to eat goos for the entire time. And then again, avoiding anything that's going to be irritating, spicy foods, high fiber foods, especially things that are going to be a choking hazard, so things that are dry and crunchy, maybe leave those for after the race. And again, experiment, find what's going to work well for you. If you're going to experiment with something new on a training run, maybe identify where the bathrooms are so you can run to those just in case. Okay, next slide, Devaney. Okay, so after you're done with your run, your nutrition needs do not stop there. You definitely want to make sure that you're refueling with the good stuff. So the goal is to restore your glycogen. So that's the basically the carbohydrate that's stored in your muscle. You want to restore those energy stores. You want to replace your fluid and electrolyte losses, and you also want to promote muscle repair. So get those little Lego blocks going. So, you might have heard people say, oh man, like I just finished my workout, I've got to make sure I get my protein. Like that's my #1 priority. That is only truly necessary, or you need to be very diligent about that if you have another form of exercise coming up in less than 8 hours. So let's say you do a workout in the evening, and then you have an early morning workout the following morning. That's when you want to make sure that you are refueling immediately, so you can make sure those glycogen stores are going to be restored. Or let's say you have a morning workout and an evening workout. That's a good example too. So, and then let's say you're only doing one workout a day, you're going for a run, same time every evening. Refueling immediately isn't a bad idea, right? You just don't have to put as much pressure on yourself, because if you're consuming enough carbohydrates and energy throughout the day, you're going to be able to restore those glycogen stores. So what you want to do is aim for a source of carbohydrates and protein. So some good examples of this can be chocolate milk, trail mix, peanut butter and banana sandwich, pita bread with hummus, yogurt, fruit. Those are all great sources. Feel free to email me if you need some post-workout snack ideas. Then you definitely want to avoid the, well, I just ran 6 miles, so I just earned myself a In-N-Out burger and a milkshake, right? This is not a good mentality to have when it comes to exercise. You know, as I mentioned earlier, I think that, you know, your diet shouldn't impact your quality of life negatively. You should be able to enjoy the foods that you love. So I have no problem with people enjoying the occasional In-N-Out or slice of pizza or whatever. But why I say this is because you want to see food as fuel, like good fuel. You want to make sure that you're refueling your body with the good type of stuff that's going to help you recover best and then feel better in your next workout. And yeah, enjoy everything in moderation, guys. Don't be afraid to have the occasional In-N-Out burger. Next slide. Okay, I think this is our last rhetorical question. Think to yourself, what is the difference between dehydration and hyponatremia? And you can also think, have I ever had these before? Let's go to the next slide. So there is a difference between these two, and they are both related to hydration complications, so things we want to definitely avoid on the run. Dehydration is the number one. It is when we lose fluid. It's a loss of fluid. This is more common, like this is something that you might run into more than hyponatremia. It's defined as a 2 to 3% loss in body weight from fluid. And when this happens, it definitely leads to a decrease in performance. To put that into perspective, that's about 3 to 4 pounds of water weight lost in a 150-pound person. And it can be made worse by heat and humidity. The other complication, it's less rare, but it is very dangerous and something you want to avoid, is hyponatremia, which is a low sodium concentration in the body. So, you know, when we're going for a run, we're sweating. Through our sweat, we're losing electrolytes. Sorry, my husband is taking our puppy outside right now. And this can be caused by an overconsumption of fluids. So, you know, you're losing electrolytes through your sweat, you're drinking plain water, you're not restoring those electrolyte needs. That can lead to hyponatremia. So, like I said, it's not as common as dehydration, but it can happen if you're doing prolonged exercise for over 4 hours. So, you know, something like a marathon, ultra marathon. And it's more likely to happen to smaller, less lean people who are running slower. They might be sweating less. They use anti-inflammatory drugs, and then also they're just drinking a lot of water. Like they're just overloading their body with fluids, and they're not replacing those electrolyte needs. So I wouldn't be too worried about hyponatremia, but it is something to keep in the back of your mind. And it also is why we want to make sure we're consuming electrolytes, which I'll get to in a second here. Here's some warning signs to look out for when it comes to dehydration, hyponatremia, just some things to keep in mind. Some easily visible things you can look out for you and your friends is the early fatigue, high perceived exertion, muscle cramps is a big one. Hyponatremia, you're holding on to fluid, right? So you're going to see swelling of your hands and your feet. You're going to feel dizzy. You're going to be vomiting and having diarrhea because your body wants to get rid of that fluid. So yeah, these are some things to keep in mind. Next slide. Thank you. Okay, so how can you meet your hydration needs when you are on the run? Here is a general guideline. Here's some like things to keep in mind, but again, everybody's different. You might need, you might have different needs, but these are some general recommendations, right? So about 2 to 3 hours before your workout, you want to consume about 16 to 20 ounces of water. It's about 2 to 3 cups. And then right before, if you want to top it off, you can consume about a glass of water. And then during, you want to be aiming for 3 to 8 ounces. A sip of water is about 1 ounce every 15 to 20 minutes. And then afterwards, you want to replenish the fluids that you lost by drinking about 16 to 24 ounces for every pound of body weight lost. And then some other things I want to point out is that runners typically lose about 1 to 4 pounds of fluid per hour, which when I first read that, I thought that was alarming until I actually tried it on myself. And it's amazing how much fluids you can lose. So that's why it's definitely important that we are drinking water as we're exercising. Different factors can affect how much we sweat and then how many electrolytes we are losing through our sweat. So keep that in mind. Your sweat rate, the amount of fluid you need to take in might be different from the person that you're running with. And then it can change throughout the year as the weather changes. You want to avoid over 2% loss of your fluids. And then also keep in mind that even a 1% loss of fluids from your body can negatively impact your performance. So that's only 1.5 pounds in a 150-pound person. And if you look at the first point I pointed out here, people lose 1 to 4 pounds of fluid per hour. You can see how easily it can be to become just a little bit dehydrated on the run. So drink up. Next slide. If you want to get more specific, maybe you are really scared of getting dehydrated on the run, or you're a really heavy sweater, you're exercising a lot or for long periods of time, it could be a good thing for you to start practicing calculating your sweat rate. So what you want to do is strip down, get yourself nude, stand on a scale. Then you want to go exercise, go for a run for about an hour, and then note the fluids that you are, or note how many fluids you're consuming. Then after you finish your run, you want to towel off, get rid of any excess fluid that might add any weight, strip down again so those clothes aren't weighing you down, weigh yourself, and then see how much weight you lost while you were exercising. Then you can subtract, that post weight from your pre-weight and see how many, what your sweat rate is, how many ounces you're losing. Then you want to add in the fluid that you consumed, right? You don't want to ignore that. Then you have, how many ounces your body loses through sweat per hour. And then, you want to be consuming fluid about every 15 minutes, right? You can divide that by 4. There's 4 15 minutes in an hour. So that will give you about how many ounces you want to aim for when it comes to fluid consumption on the run. And again, this isn't necessary for everyone, but if you are just, you really want to make sure you're getting your hydration needs, this is something that you can do. Something that I want to point out is, I know there aren't any races happening right now, but when they do start up again, one thing that you should be aware of is that the cups that they're handing to you on the course are about 5 to 7 ounces per cup. So that's something to keep in mind to help you with your hydration schedule on the run. Okay, so let's talk about electrolytes specifically. These are minerals that help our body regulate muscle contraction, nerve impulses, blood pressure, pH levels, most importantly, fluid balance. So when we're on the run, we can replenish the electrolytes that we are losing with sodium-containing sports beverages or other sources, which I'll get to in a second. This is really important if we're exercising for over 2 hours. If we're exercising in humid and hot conditions, like some of us may be experiencing right now in the summertime, and then also for heavy and salty sweaters who are losing a lot of electrolytes. So as I mentioned, you can use sodium-containing sports beverages. You can also choose to consume water, but you want to make sure that you're getting your electrolytes from somewhere else. So think about things like gels, chews, pretzels. Some people really like doing salted potatoes. Basically, things that are containing salt. After performance, it's hard to know, exactly how many electrolytes you lost while on the run. So, you can consume salty foods to help you replenish your electrolyte needs. However, it's important to keep in mind that the average person does meet their sodium needs, or exceeds them even, right? Because American diet, we love our processed foods. So, if you think that's you might not need to increase your sodium needs on days where you're not training as hard, or, a rest day. Next slide. Okay, so, like I said, races aren't necessarily happening right now, but maybe you've got a virtual race coming up. Don't be afraid to fuel up for that too. So the night before, you want to stick with foods that are lower in fiber and fat, because we know that those can cause GI distress, and we definitely want to avoid that on race day. And you can follow that hard training plate that I showed you earlier. The morning of, you want to enjoy a balanced breakfast about 3 to 4 hours before your race, ideally, even though that means waking up early. If you're not up to that, ideally just have a larger snack about 2 hours before, or an hour before, but that might be pushing it. And when you're getting to less than an hour before your race, that's when you want to be enjoying that quick digesting source of carbohydrates. So those are the things like the rice cakes, the bananas that we mentioned earlier. Also consider a liquid source of fuel, maybe like a ready-made drinkable meal replacement. That could be a good source of fuel if you're really nervous and having things in your food feels uncomfortable to you. And then make sure you're practicing your fueling plan during some of your longer runs so you can find what works well for you. Don't be afraid to pack extra fuel, even if there will be fuel on the course. You never know what can happen, right? So make sure you have maybe a couple gels, applesauce packets stashed away in your pocket. And then, try to follow your nutrition plan as best as you can, but don't panic if it's not perfect. Nothing happens perfectly on race day anyway, right? So try to smile through it, do the best that you can. And then we really want to emphasize, don't do anything new on race day. Maybe they're handing out cool samples of this jelly bean that you've never tried before. Probably not a good idea to do it if you're worried about that digestive discomfort. And then you can see here's an example of what an endurance athlete can eat the morning of and the night before their race. Let's go to the next slide. So some final thoughts for you guys. I hope you can see from this presentation that nutrition is really important for runners. If everything I said to you feels really overwhelming and you're like, oh my gosh, I don't know how I'm going to be able to do all of this, start with a small change. If you're not drinking enough water throughout the day, boom, that's the first thing you can focus on, and then go from there. Master the basics, right? Make sure that you're eating regularly throughout the day, you're drinking enough water before you get too concerned about, what supplements should I be taking? What should I be eating during my race? Because those won't matter if your foundation's not there. Do what works well for you. If everything I just said, like you're doing the exact opposite, but you're doing great, you're getting PRs, that's great, more power to you. And then, find a support system, find people who are going to encourage you to make these healthier choices, who are going to be out there on the course during your virtual race, helping you with aid stations. And then remember that food is fuel. Food is great. Don't be afraid of it. It's going to help you get to that next level of performance. And lastly, enjoy the ride. Okay, how are we doing on time? We got time to answer some questions here. Go ahead and submit them to the chat, and then Devaney can help me answer some of these. I think we already have one. How would seaweed get the same omega-3s as fish? This is so cool, actually. So think about what fish are eating, right? They're eating algae, right? So they use that algae, and then we eat the fish, and that's how we're getting our omega-3s. So that's how people kind of came up with this idea of, hey, I can take algae as a supplement to get my omega-3s. So yeah, it's newer to the market. It hasn't been studied as extensively, but it's something you could definitely try if you are a vegan or a vegetarian and you want to make sure you're meeting your omega-3 needs. Is red meat, such as beef, not recommended as a source of protein? So, the general recommendations or nutrition recommendations is to try to limit red meat because it is a source of saturated fat. One thing I want to emphasize about nutrition is it's not black and white, though. Food is not black and white. Like it's not good or bad. Food contains nutrients, some of them good, some of them bad. So red meat, it's a really good source of iron. It's a good source of a lot of other types of vitamins and minerals. I would say, you don't have to completely avoid it or never eat it. It can be part of your diet if it's something you choose to consume or something you really enjoy. But I would say, try not to eat it in excess. That would be my tip. I generally do long runs, about 2 hours once per week, early morning. Is it horrible if I don't eat 3 hours before? Yeah, I totally get that. Like if you had a 6 a.m. run, you don't want to be waking up 3 hours before. So my tip would be, again, try to wake up like, an hour before or a half hour before, and try to get something, that you can tolerate. If it's like a banana, maybe half of a bagel, just to get something in your system to get you that energy. That will definitely help you feel a lot better on your run. Can you overdo it on salts? For instance, I run with liquid IV for over 2 hours plus salt tablets, 1 per hour thereafter. has worked well for me through a 50K over 5 hours, but is there danger for too much? There definitely can be. So, you know, it's not something like you don't want to just be chugging it mindlessly. But, you know, if you are salting, if you are sweating a lot and you're doing it for an extended period of time, you definitely want to make sure you are meeting those needs. You know, I can't give you like a specific number just because people sweat differently and even the salt in our sweat is different. But I would say, you know, like pay attention to things like how you're feeling first off. And, you know, if you're feeling dizzy or lightheaded, that can be signs of dehydration, hyponatremia. And then also pay attention to health indicators like blood pressure, right? That can go up if we're consuming too much salt. And, you know, you can come see me too if we want to get really hone in on this. In addition to running, I've been doing a lot of hiking, high elevations up to 8,000 feet. What to consider for altitude sickness and overhydration? You know what, that's a good question. That's something I think I'm going to need to look into when it comes to altitude. I haven't really done a lot of research on that. So I'll get back to you on that, David. Any more questions? Ooh, I've been talking a lot. My voice is getting scratchy.
Awesome. People can unmute themselves and ask in person as well.
What about supplements, vitamin B or iron? Supplements, again, it's an individualized thing. It kind of depends on what your diet looks like or what, you know, how old you are, what your training schedule is like. So I can't answer that for you specifically. That's not to say supplements aren't always necessary. You might need a supplement, but it's something that I have to recommend after looking at a full diet. What types of foods can be eaten before and during these rigorous hikes? So hiking is a little bit different because it's not as intense, or I mean, it can be intense, but you know, generally people can, you know, things sit better in the stomach during hiking. So, you know, you might have more options. But I would say, you know, like high energy, dense foods are good. Things like trail mix. Honestly, not too different from the foods that I recommended for running. Those are all good sources of energy too. Can you add sodium in supplements or from gels, sports drink to avoid hyponatremia without limiting hydration? Okay, let me read that one more time. Can you add sodium in supplements or from gels, sports drinks? So are you saying like, I've got my Gatorade and I'm gonna add in sodium to my Gatorade? I think that's the question. Because if that is the case, most sports products, like if you're thinking about things like Gatorade, Powerade, gels, goos, those are specifically formulated with athletes in mind, keeping in mind that they are sweating. So the balance of fluid to sodium is typically good. Like you normally don't need to add extra things to there. You can probably trust them. Can you explain the difference between lean meats and red meat? So, I mean, even red meat can be on the lean side. I guess what I mean with lean meats versus more fatty meats is going to be meats that just have cuts of meat or meats that are coming from certain animals that contain less fat. So think about chicken breast versus like a chicken leg. The chicken leg is going to have a little bit more fat, as well as like if you're eating the skin around that too, that can contain more fat. But generally lean meats are going to be things like poultry, especially if you're doing like the breast of the poultry, that's going to be more lean. Pork, depending on the type of cut that you're getting, is going to be more lean. So like things like pork loin versus bacon, right? And but yeah, like even things like ground meat, if you're thinking about, you can look at the percentage of ground meat. So there can be, you know, 90% meat and 10% fat. So that's going to be a little bit more lean versus 80-20. Can you recommend What do you recommend for natural anti-inflammatories? Oh, this is a good question. So yes, there are some foods that you can consume to help with anti-inflammation or reducing inflammation in your body. Turmeric is one. My tip for that is to make sure that you're adding black pepper to turmeric. Black pepper helps make turmeric more bioavailable or more easily to be absorbed in our body, and then it can have those anti-inflammatory properties. Other things that you can try, I mean, fruits and vegetables, those are really high in antioxidants, so that's going to help with anti-inflammatory, or that's going to have anti-inflammatory properties. Omega-3s, I mentioned earlier, those are good too. Tart cherry juice or tart cherries or cherries in general are pretty high in antioxidants. So those are things you can experiment with post-workout as well to help with inflammation. Good question. What if we wanted to consult with you? You can email either me or Devaney. My email is up on the screen here. And then Devaney's is dmo@teamexos.com. All of our consults are virtual right now, so you don't have to worry about leaving your home. Yeah. I think, did we answer all our questions? Hopefully you have more. I know we kind of scratched the surface here, and there can be a lot more questions or things that apply to you as an individual. So, don't hesitate to email me. Hopefully you learned something. Tell your friends that couldn't attend the meeting too to reach out to me if they have any questions. I'm a runner. Talking about running and nutrition is one of my favorite things. So I would love to help. You're welcome, Melissa. Yay, thank you.
Thanks guys for being here. That clocked in a little over an hour. If you guys have any more questions, you guys have Paige's email, my email. I'll follow up with an email to all of our attendees that registered on Eventbrite, and join us on Instagram. We've got some free training going on. Join us outdoors. This cross training is great for runners. We do a lot of injury prevention work while we're out there. So,
and it's free workouts. Woo-hoo.
Yeah.
The whole schedule is on Instagram if you want to see when we're meeting and all that kind of stuff. Cool.
Great. Well, I guess I'll log off then. Thanks for being here, guys.
Good. I hope to see you all in person soon. I can't wait till we can all meet again. Take care.